problem all content creators are faced with that not many content creators talk about, and that has everything to do with storage.
You need a lot of storage to create content. You need scratch storage, more scratch storage, you need some archival storage, storage for your OS, more storage for your OS or games or whatever else. You just need a lot of storage. And today we're going to talk about the most important storage for creating content, which is storage for your projects.
The problem with storage for content creators is that video and photo editing not only requires a lot of space per project, but they also require a lot of read and writes. And while those read and writes will probably not kill your MacBook Pro anytime soon, I personally don't think it's worth taking that risk. You see, each drive, every single drive that you go out there and purchase has a soft, let's call it a soft read and write limit. So it's not a hard limit. So basically a hard limit would be a limit that as soon as it hits there, it's done and gone. A soft limit is it can go over it, it can go under it. It's just a rough estimate for that. Anyway, it has a soft read and write limit. And as the drive approaches that read and write limit, the drive slows down and the drive becomes closer to failure. For example, the Crucial P5 Plus that I have in here has a limit of 600 terabytes written. Now, 600 terabytes written is a lot of data. That's a ton, and it's gonna take years for this drive to get to that point. But as a creator, as a tech savvy person, I would rather have those read and writes on a drive that I don't care too much about, a drive that I can easily replace. And then we have the amount of storage for each project. My projects range between 60 and 100 gigs in size, and they're only going to get bigger now that I'm transitioning to larger 10-bit footage. I also typically work on 3 to 5 projects at a time, so at a minimum, we're looking at between 150 and 500 gigabytes for active projects. So what can we creators do? Well, we could of course upgrade the internal storage of our devices, and this is great because internal storage is typically super fast. But if you're like me and have an M1 device, well, upgrading the storage must be done at purchase. Not to mention, upgrading also costs about $200 per 512 gigs you would like. 512 is an extra 200, 1 terabyte is an extra 400, 2 terabytes an extra $800 over the base model, which is insane. Also, this storage is basically non-replaceable, and so when it dies, it dies. We could also build or buy a network attached storage device, and I'm talking about this right here. These are great for archiving projects and footage, but it's also probably too slow to actively video edit from. It's also a bit more expensive at the beginning to set one up, and it's more of a backup solution overall. We then have pre-built external SSDs. This is just an old external hard drive I had lying around that I could use for reference, and that's why I'm showing it here today. But overall, external SSDs are great. They are plenty fast enough for video or photo editing. They're much more affordable compared to upgrading the internal storage of the M1 device or buying a network attached storage device. And if it fails, you just go ahead and pick up a new one. But they are upgradable, and there is kind of a better option for about the same price and performance. And that's this, a DIY external SSD. Now, of course, there are going to be 2 variables in this situation, the enclosure itself, as well as the internal M.2 SSD, and combined, they tend to be about the same price or a little bit cheaper, as well as having the same performance as their pre-built counterparts. Not to mention, these also tend to have better warranties as well. Off the bat, for SSDs up to 1 terabyte in size, the Silicon Power 880 is currently the best bang for buck option, coming in at about $90. Anything over that, I like the Inland Platinum right now, as it has great value for the larger size drives. Now keep in mind, your enclosure is going to bottleneck the drive, and so you don't need the best, the fastest of the fastest when it comes to these M.2 SSDs. And if you can't find one of the 2 drives I recommended here, or you just absolutely hate those drives for one reason or another, check out the description box below. I'm gonna have a link to the SSD tier list. Anything on tier C or above is gonna be great for this use case, as long as it has DRAM. Now on the enclosure side, things are a little bit different. I had 4 major criteria that would ensure that the enclosure would work for me. 1, it needed to be fast enough to video edit from. 2, it needed to be compatible with the Thunderbolt ports on my actual MacBook Air, as well as just standard USB-C ports on my Windows PC. 3, it needed to be compatible with the Crucial P5 Plus. And 4, it needed to stay cool to the touch even while under heavy load, so that if I wanted to travel with this, it would be no concern for me to do so. And in this journey, I ended up testing out 5 different enclosures: the Anker PowerXpand USB 3.1 Gen 2, the Asus ROG Strix Orion, the Sabrent USB 3.2, the Sabrent Thunderbolt 3, and the Kanyid USB 4.0. And I feel like every one of these could work for content creators out there, besides the PowerXpand 3.1 from Anker. While it was the cheapest out of the ones I tested, it was super inconsistent in the write department, and so I personally can't recommend it for our uses. What I can recommend is the Sabrent USB 3.2 or the Asus ROG Strix Orion. Both enclosures coming in around $60, and are definitely fast enough for content creation with read and write speeds at about 8 to 900 megabytes consistently. I personally ended up with the Sabrent USB 3.2 enclosure that I have right here, but that was only because the Asus ROG Strix Orion enclosure that I tested out before this wasn't compatible with the Crucial P5 Plus that I was planning on using. Now, if you need to transfer large data sets often, and time is always of the essence, the Kanye USB 4.0 enclosure could be good for you. It has read and write speeds over 2000 megabytes per second, but the enclosure gets incredibly hot even while idle. It also doesn't have the nicest build, but it was pretty cheap compared to like the other USB 4.0 drives. So, you know, that really is going to have to be dependent on what you think and what's important to you. If you want a higher quality actual feel and build of the drive, you're probably going to be spending closer to $150, $200 on the enclosure itself versus the, I think it was roughly $100, $110 that the Kanye was out of the box. So yeah, as always, links to everything I just talked about down in the description box below. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments. And now I suggest you guys watching this video right here where I'm going to go over my 2022 M1 MacBook Air setup. I absolutely love this setup. It's awesome for productivity, although I am considering dropping some money on that Mac Studio because the Mac Studio looks pretty sweet too. Anyway, thanks so much for watching, guys. I'll see you in that next one, and have a great day.